Hello, good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Here from Francois.T, no matter where you are around the world, I want to welcome you to this live chat. Today, I'm going to be doing an audio recording live of some of a book that I've written and I've started reading out on my channel called Cold in the Rain. We are up to chapter 6, and I thought I would read it live. So if anyone comes along into the room and wants to leave a comment or say hi, I will read it out during this live stream. But yeah, I thought everyone could listen along while I was reading it at the same time. So I'll just take a moment and then we will begin. All right, are we ready? All right, guys, here we go. Cold in the Rain, Chapter 6, The Moonlight Freeze. After receiving the all good from Lauren, Jay hung up the phone. He knew Andy would be fine with him placing the boys in his hotel room, especially considering he had told Lauren to take Andy's card off the account and put his own on there instead. Lauren was admittedly disappointed hearing that Jay was moving out of the hotel, as she had quite come to like him, but was thrilled when he had explained that it was just because he was house-sitting for Andy. Jay walked back and opened the door to find Rick and John smoking some cigarettes. "Hey guys," he smiled, appreciating the casualness of the two suits as he had referred to them in his head. "Oh, sorry man," Rick responded, referring to the smoke, and immediately put it on the ground and stomped it out. "It's all good," Jay replied. "I smoke too," he said simply. This earned a smile from John, who had not butted his out just yet, and so he continued to smoke. "Okay, so it's all set up. You'll have my room at the hotel. I'll come with you guys so that I can get my stuff." "This is very generous of you," Rick replied. "Look, Rick, was it?" The black-haired boy just nodded. "I appreciate the politeness. I really, really do. But seriously, one more time and I might just say no," Jay teased. "Too polite for your own good, I told you. Now shut up, man, before we wind up on the street," John said, now butting out his own smoke. "Lead the way, man." Jay had decided to take the scenic route rather than catch a cab. For one thing, he could do with the walk, and for another, he wanted these guys to know just how close the place was, just in case they needed anything. When they arrived at the hotel, Lauren, unsurprisingly, stood there with the same smile she'd worn the first time Jay had walked in. "Hi, I'm Lauren, and welcome to the Detendez-vous." "Hi, I'm Rick," Rick said excitedly, extending his hand for Lauren to shake, which she did. "And this is John." John simply waved. "Pleased to meet you both." "Can Taylor help you with your bags?" she asked, taking Jay back to his first night here at the hotel. "Oh, should I get my—" Jay started. "Already taken care of," Lauren replied dismissively, before turning back to the two men who had turned to follow Taylor. "If you need anything, just ask. And remember, at the Detendez-vous, we're not happy unless you are." The two men smiled and disappeared with Taylor. The moment they were out of sight, Lauren's smile dropped into a sigh. "And how long did it take you to change modes after I'd gone?" Jay teased. "Much less time, buddy, and believe me, I was more pissed with you," she smiled. "So Jay," Rain started from behind the desk. She was so tiny, Jay couldn't help but think that no one could be mistaken for not even noticing she was there. Not that she was short, but she was so skinny. "You staying for tea? The foyer opens in 20 minutes. Jay liked Rain. Whilst he didn't know too much about her, she just seemed like such a sweet young lady. "I will on one condition," he responded, reflecting her smile. "A condition?" she asked. Okay, proceed." "That you and your mum accompany me tonight to some singer thing." "Singer thing?" Lauren questioned, half snorting. "I don't sing, and I certainly don't go to something that's labelled a thing." Jay chuckled lightly. "It's this lady I met this afternoon." "Shh, lady? What lady?" Lauren inquired nosily. Oh, some friend of Andy's. Carmita, I think her name is. Anyway, she's in town tonight performing some songs from her album, and she's personally invited Andy and me to go. But since he's not here, I figured I'd take you guys. My treat. Lauren smiled. Generally, when a man asked her to go somewhere, it was because they had other intentions. But with Jay being gay, she knew that would hardly be the case this time. Where is it? She asked. Moonlight Freeze? Jay questioned, having never heard of it before. I love that place, Lauren squealed. They have all these great artists come in every night. It's a great place to kick back, have a few drinks, and listen to some real up-and-coming talent. Count me in. Great, Jay smiled. Rain? I would so love to, Rain said. But seriously, I have this huge exam to study for, and if I don't get to it tonight, I never will. Study schmuddy, girl. Take off that study hat and put on some dancing shoes, Lauren replied. Thank you, Jay. Really, I'll go next time, I promise. So you'll owe me, he half joked. I'll owe you, she smiled. But you two go. Have fun. You know, there's no better party girl in town than this one, she said, referring to her mother. Oh, you're so sweet, Lauren smiled at her daughter. Always here to help, Rain replied. I still can't believe he just flew right down, Mel said, as she pulled the car into the hospital car parking lot. I mean, I get why he'd be upset, but I don't know. I don't get it. Believe me, you're not the only one, Andy replied. As the pair moved through the automatic doors at the entrance to the hospital, however, Andy's thoughts were ripped away from Jay and became 100% focused on his papa. Despite the fact that Mika was technically his cousin, before Andy had left Pittsburgh, he had told him and Ben that they were like father figures to him. They had not only been so glad to hear it, but it also informed him the feeling was mutual, and that they thought of him as a son. Mika had instantly become papa, and Ben dad. Andy, forgetting about Mel momentarily, rushed up to the reception desk. I'm looking for my father, he started, then stopped, remembering. I'm sorry. I mean, my cousin. The lady behind the desk gave Andy a skeptical look. Mm-hmm, she simply replied. Name? Mika. Mika Bruckner. The receptionist replied, typing the name into the computer. Bruckner. Oh, yes, here he is. Okay, so he's in ICU at the moment. Take the elevator to the 4th floor. You're after the west side. Oh, and we only allow next of kin into the rooms in ICU, and only 2 at a time. Andy smiled and quickly thanked the lady before bolting to the elevator. Andy, Mel screamed out after him. Damn, man, heels. Sorry, Mel, Andy replied. I forgot. Mel waved it off as the pair entered the elevator. On the ride up to the 4th floor, Andy continued to worry about his papa. Despite the fact that he had left Pittsburgh because of Jay, he had regretted leaving Mika and Ben behind, and hearing how bad Mika seemed made Andy feel so much worse, especially considering that Jay had flown down to him anyway. Ding! The elevator door sounded and opened, meaning they'd arrived on the 4th floor. Which way? Excuse me. Which way? Mel asked, looking around. The lady said the west side, Andy replied. However, neither of them could see any directions. All they could see were different coloured lines on the floor, which seemed to lead off into different directions. What is this? The goddamn freaking Hospital Oz? Andy screamed out in anger. Andy, calm down, Mel replied softly. Calm down? Calm down? Andy was now screaming at the top of his lungs. My papa is in the hospital, ICU no less, and you're telling me to calm the F down? But just then, the sound of a very familiar voice was heard coming around the corner. Andy? Andy, is that you? Once in plain sight, Andy could tell it was Ben. Dad, he screamed, bolting towards him and into his arms. Papa? Dad? Now, having the foggiest what Andy was on about. Last she heard, Mika was Andy's cousin, and Ben, well, his cousin's husband. What was all this papa and dad stuff about? Where was that coming from? It's okay, son, Ben replied, embracing his now sobbing child. Come on, he's this way. Ben led Andy around the corner. Mel was a tad confused on whether to follow them or leave, but then realizing she was most likely Andy's ride home, she followed them, keeping her distance so as not to invade the family moment. As they turned the corner, with Andy's face still buried in his father's chest, a nurse at the desk looked up at them, but then simply smiled. "This is Andy," he said. "Oh," the nurse mouthed. "Andy, sweetheart, my name is Nurse Michaels. I just need you to sign this, and then you can go and see your papa." Hearing the nurse refer to Mika as his papa surprised Andy, but in a good way, and so he popped his head up from Ben's chest and took the pen from her. "You'll be pleased to know your papa is doing very well for what he's been through. He's been asking for you, you know." She smiled. Andy finished signing and mumbled a thanks. "Sure," she smiled. "This way." Ben informed Andy that he was going to talk with Mel for a bit to give him some time to see his cousin. And as much as Andy would really have preferred to hold on to his dad and not let go, he appreciated the sentiment nonetheless. Despite what the nurse had said earlier, as Andy made his way down to see his papa, he couldn't help but fear what would be on the other side of the door. "Oh my God, you're such a rebel," Jay squeaked. "You had to know my mother," Lauren replied, smiling. They had made it to the Moonlight freeze, but hadn't expected the car park to be so packed. Fortunately, Lauren, who was always up for a chat, had wasted no time in telling Jay some fun-time stories of her past, which Jay had lapped up. "Trust me, I get it," he grinned. "Whatever you have, I bet I can top it," Lauren grinned back, before checking herself out in one of the club's reflecting windows. She had chosen this gorgeous black halter-neck dress and adorned herself with some silver diamond earrings and a necklace to match. "Okay, I'll open," Jay replied, checking himself out at the same time. "How about religious and having a gay son?" "Oh, good open," Lauren responded, appreciating the fact that she had taken Jay out and bought him a gorgeous suit for the event. He had shown up to the hotel in nothing but sweats and a tee, and to Lauren, when it came to this place, that was just totally unacceptable. "But I raised you, rich snob of a mother, who was never satisfied regardless of what I did." Good," Jay acknowledged. "But my mother caught me with an older guy, and then rather than deal with it, went and told my abusive father." "Kid," Lauren smiled, "you'll never win this game, so I'll just play my match point card. I, who was raised to be a proper upstanding young lady, fell pregnant at 16, and my mother has never once forgiven me for it. Some people say they love their parents. I barely tolerate mine. Game, set, and match, Lauren." Jay just smiled defeated as Lauren held open the door to walk through. "Welcome to the Moonlight freeze," she said happily. Jay laughed. "You're not at work. You don't have to do that anymore," he said, earning a slight shove from her. The pair walked inside the club, and it was by far and away the most beautiful club Jay had ever seen. Set up to be what looked more like a dinner theatre restaurant than a club, this place was outlined by a sea of purple curtains running the entire perimeter, topped off with golden ropes at the end. Unlike a formal theatre dinner setting, however, the tables were scattered everywhere, adorned with white tablecloths and candle lamps, each table also topped with a bunch of roses. "Classy," Jay smiled, talking a little louder to be heard over the music playing in the background. "I told you you'd love it," Lauren smiled back. To top off how perfect this place had seemed, no sooner had they sat down and an adorable waiter came right over to them. "Welcome, welcome," he said, flapping his arms around in excitement and pulling back a chair for Lauren. "I'm Dale, and I'll be your server. Can I get you any drinks?" Lauren looked over at Jay and made a quick suggestive glance towards the waiter. Jay smiled. Despite the fact that Andy was not here to enjoy it, it looked like tonight might be a fun night after all. "Moonlight and us dancing amore," Carmita sang out, ending a particularly somber love ballad to the applause of a very appreciative New Haven crowd. It had turned out that Kamita had been a huge hit with the Moonlight Freeze Club, and Jay was beginning to realize just how much talent the Latina had. Her music so far had varied from pop to blues and from ballads to light metal, and Jay was in awe of her talent. God, she's so good, Lauren screamed out over the cheering club. Rain's going to be so mad she missed this. I know, right? Jay confirmed. I wonder where we can find her album. Oh, come now, bashful fan 179, Lauren mocked. I'm sure Andy can hook you up with your new goddess's latest and greatest. Jay smiled. Just as he had predicted, the night had been an absolute blast. Aside from the vocal entertainment, he had heard some more fun stories from Lauren, mainly involving rain, and even shared a great laugh when, still flittering around like a hummingbird, Dale had accidentally spilt some wine over the tablecloth, and Lauren had informed him that all he owed them both was a kiss on the cheek. Lauren had enjoyed the night too, and was seriously considering hiring Kamita to perform at the Detendezvous, realizing that she could probably cater to any audience placed in front of her. She was just that captivating. Lauren then bit her lip. Despite the fact that it had been a good night, she had actually come here with a few intentions in mind, and one of them had been to have a frank chat with Jay about his thoughts and feelings towards Andy. After Andy had told her everything about what had happened up in Pittsburgh, wonder that Jay had flown straight down. But now that he'd moved into Andy's place for God only knew how long, she wanted to set things straight with this boy and ensure that Andy's feelings wouldn't get hurt. Feel like a smoke? She asked casually. You don't smoke, Jay replied, not knowing full well if that was true or not, but from what he had come to know about this woman, nothing about her screamed smoker. Hadn't Rain said something about caffeine being her only addiction? No, I don't, Lauren confessed, but I heard you do. You don't mind? Jay asked, knowing that most people who didn't smoke were quite offended when around those who lit up. Please, my father smoked Cubans every day. It was either get used to the smell or, well, or nothing. Just get used to it. That was good enough for Jay, and so the pair stood up and made their way to the smoking area, waving at Kamita, who was now singing a spicy Latina number called Affairs of the Sun. Seductively in character, Kamita waved back and blew a stage kiss at Jay, who mocked shyness before following Lauren outside. Cold night, Jay mentioned, lighting up as the pair took their seats. Yeah, it is a little nippy, Lauren responded again, biting her lip. She knew she had to do this now, otherwise she wouldn't have the strength. Taking a breath, she decided to just go for it. Okay, kid, so you and I have only known each other for a few days, but, well, I guess I feel like we can kind of talk person to person, you know? Yeah, Jay smiled. I feel the same way. So, checking out Dale, huh? He teased. Oh yeah, Lauren replied. There's just something about a man whose aspirations seem to include joining the hummingbird race. Jay laughed nervously. He had the feeling this was about more than the waiter. No, this is about you and my dear friend, who has for some reason left the state yet again. Oh, Jay simply replied. He had decided not to tell her any more other than that Andy had needed to go to New Haven for some family thing. He figured it was not his place to tell Lauren she was Andy's friend, and despite what had seemed to be a great effort at this moment, he was still not going to tell her any more than just that. I know just as much as you do, he said, flicking his cigarette and taking another drag. He left this afternoon to deal with some family thing. But Lauren frowned and then simply glared at Jay, who was taken a little aback as he recalled the saying, if looks could kill. No, I mean about you and him, she corrected. Now, let's save ourselves the 2-hour roundabout game and get to the point. I know what happened in Pittsburgh, and so I get why after you decided to come down and that he put you up in one of my rooms. But now, moving in with him? He's my dearest friend, Jay. What's going on? Jay took the final drag of his cigarette and took his time butting it out, thinking about how to fully address this situation, especially considering he had no idea himself. Honestly? No, I want you to lie, Lauren mocked. Jay smiled. Honestly, I have no idea. We actually had planned on discussing the situation ourselves when he got the call to fly out to Pittsburgh. He then practically packed and fled, asking me to stay and house him. Oh, Lauren thought to herself. So Andy hadn't asked Jay to move in, so much as to just look after the house while he was away. She considered dropping the conversation there, but figured since Jay was opening up that she may as well continue. So Jay, what do you want to come out of all of this? Jay thought about it. He was happy he had made the decision to come down and see Andy, and even more happy that he'd gotten to meet Lauren and Rain. But for some reason, he felt like he still hadn't worked out where he stood with this whole issue. Did he want to remain friends with Andy? Did he want something more? Could something more even be worked out? Was it worth risking the shaky friendship that they had, seemingly only just started, to get back on track? Truth? He asked, seeing Lauren nod. He continued. Edward, your ex? Yeah, Edward has really broken my heart, and it's tough to move past that. He could feel tears that he had apparently suppressed from the moment he first found out about the situation start to slowly form. But Lauren took the reins. It's not easy when the one we love betrays us, she emphasized. Yeah, Jay said, nodding as the tears fell down his cheek. And I did, Lauren. For the first time since finally dealing with the fact that B didn't love me the way I wanted, no, deserved to be loved, I was actually happy and deeply, deeply in love with him. Lauren pulled a tissue out of her purse and handed it to Jay. And now? She tentatively asked. Well, Jay began, I don't know. I mean, in truth, Andy would be the perfect guy for me. Let's be honest. I already know that. But with feeling the way I do right now and hurting so much, it's just too painful to even consider falling into another relationship, whether he wants to or not. Lauren soothingly rubbed Jay's back as he slowly started to wipe away the tears in vain. So why did you come up here to New Haven? She asked softly. Honestly, to get away from everyone at home. I knew they'd be too distracting, and I just couldn't deal with that just yet. All the drama. Lauren snorted softly. What? Jay questioned. Nothing, she replied. No, seriously, Jay now smiled. Ever wonder why Andy left Pittsburgh 2 days ago? She asked the golden-haired boy. Jay sat there and thought about it for a moment, and then suddenly it hit him. To get away from me? He asked, smiling, already knowing the answer. Uh-huh, Lauren replied, and the pair burst into laughter. And that's the end of chapter 6 of Cold in the Rain. I'm going to take a very quick minute or two interval, and then I'll be back with chapter 7. If you have any comments on what you've heard so far, leave them in the comments section, and I'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. Okay, let's move on to chapter 7. Chapter 7, Finally Letting Go. Look who's here, Nurse Michael said, moving into Mika's room. Son, Mika cried weakly. But Andy, who wanted nothing more than to hug his papa, had suddenly become rooted to the spot. Not only did he have a weakened voice, but Mika was attached to several tubes and had an IV drip sticking out of his arm. Andy hated hospitals and needles at the worst of times, but to see all of this on his papa seemed to be too much for his mind to cope with. "Could you give us a minute?" Mika croaked to the nurse. "Of course," she smiled as she left the two alone. "It's still me, son," Mika breathed. What, 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 what happened?" Andy finally asked. "In truth, I was an idiot," Mika revealed. "I was down at Babylon and like that, it was though whatever had Andy frozen had unfrozen him as a wave of cynicism took over." "Of course you were," he interrupted, looking at his papa sorrowfully. Now that he could move, Andy walked over to his papa. "Can I hug you?" he asked, fearing that by doing so he may damage one of the tubes. "You'd better," his papa laughed. As Andy got closer, he saw that Mika's right arm was actually free. It was only his left arm that was hooked up to the IV pole, and the tubes, though moments ago looked so ominous, now hardly seemed as bad as first glance. Andy practically threw himself into his papa's arm and rested his head on his chest. Just being with him again, and even smelling his papa's scent, made him realize how much he had missed him, despite the fact that it had only been a few days. But here he was, tubes and all, and Andy was just so grateful to see his papa that everything that had happened in the past week came flooding out of his eyes as he sobbed uncontrollably. Mika held his son close. There was no way he was going to be the first to let go. Even if Andy cried for an hour straight, he knew this was exactly what he needed. And though Mika wouldn't admit it himself, this is what he had needed too. Momentarily forgetting his predicament, Mika sighed contentedly. "Finally letting go, huh?" he asked, noting that these were the first tears Andy had shed in front of him since everything that had gone down with Jay. Normally, and especially under these dire situations, Andy would stop himself and apologize for acting this way when clearly the other man was in a worse situation. But there was something about his papa that seemed to break down all of the walls he seemed to keep around others, and so he simply nodded, still buried in Mika's chest. "Hmm?" came the muffled response from the boy. 20 minutes, though what seemed like an hour later, Andy lifted his head and kissed his papa before grabbing a chair nearby and sitting in it. "Okay," he said, wiping away the stray tears that had not managed to find their way to Mika's chest. "Continue. You were at Babylon, and—" Mika, momentarily paralyzed by Andy's sudden change of tone, became quite stunned, but then righted himself and continued his story. "Yes, I was at the top balcony area. You know, the viewpoint." Andy smiled and nodded. The viewpoint was the highest point you could stand at the gay club Babylon. The gays called it that, because from that point you could look over the balcony and get the perfect view of all the hot guys on the dance floor. "Well, Bryan and I were arguing because—" "Oh no, you didn't," Andy responded angrily. "Didn't what?" his papa asked. Andy could see it play out in his mind, and as much as he loved his papa for it, he couldn't believe he had said something. "You talked to Bryan about the whole Jay and me thing, didn't you?" he asked, though mad, still quite concerned. Mika never responded, but by the sheepish look he was giving off now, he didn't have to. "Oh, papa," Andy exclaimed, "I love you more than words, but why?" "Andy," Mika tried, rolling towards him, but found himself restricted by the IV pole, so Andy got up and sat on the bed. "You're my son. I'm not going to have anyone talking crap about you, even if it is B." Mika lowered his voice so much before mentioning the name of the man who had played a major part in Jay's ex cheating that Andy was lucky to have caught it at all. He also knew that despite what Andy may have felt about Jay and about B in general, that B was Mika's best friend, and so to hear this was not only odd, but actually quite touching. So he started it? Andy breathed in sharply, suddenly pissed off with B. Well, yeah, he was saying crap about you, and I wasn't about to let that happen. So we fought, and well, I ended up overboard. Mika not only had lowered his tone again, but this time had turned away from his son, not daring to finish that sentence facing him. Fuck, Andy replied, shocked that this was how Mika had ended up here. This was enough to turn Mika back around to face his son. Son, language, he said as sternly as he could. But Dad, Andy whined. No, I raised you better than that, despite the circumstances. Andy just looked at his papa, having no idea what else to say. Many questions had flooded his mind, such as, how did you end up overboard? Were you pushed? Did you slip? And more importantly, where was Dad? But he swallowed them all and asked the one and only question he knew he needed an answer to. So, what happens now? Well, Mika started smiling, I'm going to get out of this bed, put on my robe, and we're going to go to the beach and cruise the hotties, of course. He laughed. He tried to laugh, but ended up coughing quickly afterwards. Andy just smiled. This was so his papa, eternally optimistic whenever something directly happened to him, despite the fact that he worried like no one else when something happened to someone he loved. Mika had proven time and time again that when it had come to something happening to him, he acted like nothing happened to spare everyone else. But this was Andy he was talking to, and he wasn't about to let his papa get away with this for another moment. Yeah, now I see where I get the hiding what's going on to everyone else from. But papa, it's me. Cut the crap and give it to me straight. I love you, and when you love someone, you're honest with them, right? You taught me that. It was true. Mika, above anyone else, had always favoured honesty, and had brought Andy up to be the same way. Though Andy didn't always take his advice, when it came to the critical moments like this, he always did, and knew he always would. Okay, son, Mika sighed. So they're going to run a few more tests to see what the extensive damage is. After that, if it's nothing too big, I'll be transferred out of here and placed in a normal room for observation, and then I'll go home. If it's worse, then Mika stopped. He didn't know how to address this with his son. No matter his age, he was way too young. Then, Andy demanded, always hating being told half a story. Then, who knows, Mika said. And that's the truth. We won't know anything until the test results come back. You've been talking to way too many doctors, Andy smiled, knowing all doctors said that as though it were a line they were all taught during training. Mika simply smiled. Any hotties? Andy couldn't help but ask. For a long time, while Andy was staying with his papa, they had a long-running tradition whenever Mika was single. It was a game they played called Spot the Hottie, where they'd go out to the beach and stand there, looking around, until one of them spotted the man they fantasized would be their future husband. They'd pick him out, tell the other, and then after giving them a fake name, would proceed to tell the other about what their lives would consist of. Thinking back on it, Andy missed those days, and he vowed that he would play this game before leaving Pittsburgh at least one more time with his papa. No one as hot as your dad, Mika laughed. Hey, can you pass me some water? He croaked. Andy jumped up right away, and upon seeing a jug of water and plastic mugs nearby, poured some for his papa. Mika thankfully took a sip before sighing and turning back to his son. In truth, from the moment Mika had awoken in hospital, a part he had purposely left out telling his son, all he had asked was for Andy. Not that he wasn't glad to see his husband by his side, but he had missed his son. Now with Andy here, by his side once more, Mika felt that, regardless of the news to come, that everything was right with the world. So, he smiled, B did say one thing that surprised me, and I have a big question for you, mister. Oh, Andy replied. What? He smiled. Why didn't you tell me that Jay had followed you back to New Haven? I had a really great time, Jay said, looking at Lauren. You know, if this were a movie, you would be kissing me goodnight right now, she replied, smiling. If this were a movie, I'd be driving you home rather than the other way around, Jay laughed, before compromising and kissing her on the cheek. Seriously though, I know you don't know anyone here, and if you ever need to talk, my lips will remain sealed, Lauren said. Jay smiled, appreciating the gesture as he unbuckled his seatbelt. Thanks, Lauren, he replied, before getting out of the car. Oh, and by the way, if those boys give you any trouble, you'll be the first I call. Night, Jay. Night, Lauren. Oh, and remind Rain she owes me, he cracked. Believe me, Rain takes promises as seriously as studying. Remind me to tell you about the time she missed my graduation. What? Jay laughed, surprised that sweet, innocent Rain would ever do something like that. Next time, Lauren smiled as she pulled out of the driveway. Jay watched her and then headed back into Andy's house. Despite the fact that he was still confused with what was happening between them, he was happy to think that he'd at least made a friend. As he closed the front door behind him, Jay could think of nothing but sleep. Thinking nothing of it, he dragged himself to Andy's bedroom before turning on the light and getting undressed. As he lay in Andy's bed, he couldn't help but notice how his window was perfectly faced for him to look up and out into the night sky. Jay loved looking up at the stars. It always made him feel at ease. Just as he was about to doze off, his phone rang. Andy smiled as he saw the name flashing on the screen. Hey, he said, answering the call. Hey, you, Andy's voice rang through. How's things? Yeah, okay, I guess, Jay smiled. Where are you? Andy replied, noticing how quiet it was over there. I'm in bed, actually, Jay smiled. It was the truth after all. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I wake you? No, I literally just climbed in. I went out with your best friend tonight. Lauren? Yeah. Oh, how was it? Great, actually. We went to Carmita's thing, Jay replied. Oh, I forgot, he heard his friend cry out. Was she pissed? Honestly, we didn't speak, so I don't know. I mean, she waved at me at one point, but she was busy, with performing and all. Yeah, that makes sense, Andy smiled. So how was it being with Lauren? She didn't give you too much trouble, did she? No, not at all. She's a good woman, that friend of yours. I like her. Yeah, she is, Andy smiled. So what about you? How's Mika? Andy told Jay about his visit to see his papa, and how, though had looked horrible at first glance, actually looked better than Andy thought he would. We just have to wait on the results of his tests and go from there. I'm trying to remain optimistic. Of course, Jay replied. Oh, by the way, before I forget, I met some strapping lads today. Oh, Andy replied, feeling his heart drop momentarily. Sure, they were yet to discuss everything, but Andy was really hoping the pair were going to finally get together. But hearing the blonde talk about other guys didn't sound so promising. Yeah, one was this jock type, and another was so polite you'd swear he just got out of a monastery. Sounds great, Andy replied, hoping it sounded convincing. Oh yeah, I mean, they seemed nice, but then again, how much fun can you have with a guy named Rick and another named John? Jay couldn't help but smile as he heard the sound of Andy sitting bolt upright. Oh my god, they showed up? Andy squealed, sounding very excited. Oh, do you know them? Jay replied jokingly. Yeah, they said they wanted to see you, but obviously you weren't here. Don't worry though, they're shacked up in my old room at the hotel. I didn't think you'd mind. Don't worry, I'm paying for it. You shouldn't have to do that, Jay. They're my friends, Andy replied in earnest. Andy, it's all good, Jay laughed. You just focus on things with your dad, and I'll let you know what happens this end, okay? Okay, Andy replied. Oh, by the way, Jay? Yeah? Jay replied. I'm sorry we didn't have a chance to have that talk. Me too, Andy. But don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. You deal with your dad first, and we'll talk about it when you get back, okay? Okay. Sleep well, Andy. Night, sweetie, Andy replied. Jay hung up the phone, pleased Andy had called. Not that he could take too much away from one phone call, but he genuinely felt that he was exactly where he needed to be. Who knew if they would wind up together? But whether they did or not, Jay couldn't help but smile with how well his life seemed to be looking, and he closed his eyes as he drifted off to sleep. And that's the end of chapter 7. So I hope you enjoyed the reading of those 2 chapters. If you did, give me a thumbs up and let me know. I'm thinking that I will do my readings live from now on. So if you guys wanted to come along for the readings, that would be great. So yeah, we might do some more tomorrow. We'll see how things go. But yeah, as I said, let me know what you thought. And it'd be great to get some feedback from you guys. Either way, I hope you're all having a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, or sleep if you're sleeping right now. We have so many people with so many different time zones here. Comment below and let me know. But I thank you once again for your company, whether you joined me live or whether you're watching this late. Until I see you again, make love and not war, and give someone that you love a hug today. Bye, guys.